This is the sound test. 1, 2. Let me know if you hear me. Hello everybody. Here's another sound test by request of Andrew, and we will start in about 3 minutes. Thank you. Okay, everybody, it's almost time to start. So people are still joining. We have 250, but let me start and go through the agenda. Well, people are still joining, so that I don't keep you waiting, because it's Friday night, right? For me, at least. Tomorrow is a public holiday. Where am I? So we have some plans with my team. So today we'll talk about vSphere 6.5, all the changes that impacting backup one way or another. So everything we've learned so far, and hopefully it will help you to avoid any issues, facing any issues after you upgrade if you know them in advance. So the agenda, I split it in a way that from the points that are important to everybody, and then at the end I'll talk about encrypted VMs, because it's probably not what everybody wants to use in the environment. It's primarily designed for the service providers. So if you want to drop off if you need to go somewhere else and you don't want to use encrypted VMs, then that would be a good time to drop off. Oops, sorry. Okay, so I think it's almost 4 past an hour, so let's start. So first, some general considerations that kind of helps to set the stage. To know, so the way we handle VDDK is, as you probably know, all the interaction for backup programs do with VMware is done through VDDK API that VMware provides ISVs, and VDDK gets updated every vSphere release. Normally VDDK supports the current release it is associated with and the next release, and sometimes also the previous. But we basically, because for the few reasons, first because we support so many ESXi versions, but also because we don't want to jump immediately the new VDK versions because they usually have bugs. Because of that, in our data mover there are actually multiple VDDK versions, and we'll use the different VDDK version depending on what is the ESXi host version that we're interacting with. So pull up the table. So that's basically how it looks. As of 9.5 update 1, we have 3 versions of VDDK, and you can see that, for legacy hosts we're using 504. Then for 6.0 we're still gonna use 6.02 even if you upgrade to 9.5 update 1. And if you have 6.5 host or 6.5 vCenter, we'll use VDDK 6.5. Again, that's primarily, we've done that mistake once. I think it was in 6.0 when we released the support for 6.0. We replaced VDDKs, and that VDDK, the new version of VDDK 6.0, was used both for vSphere 6.0 and vSphere 5.5, and it was pretty nasty. I mean, there was a lot of people impacted because the new VDDK carried a number of new bugs. So we don't want to do it again now. We're very careful. So again, the new VDDK and all the limitations I'm going to be talking about later that VDDK brings is only going to be impacting 6.5. Yeah, almost a joke, but not really, right? Note how every VDK version before had many minor updates, right? So right now we have a first release of VDK. It will definitely have bugs and updates and hotfixes. So yeah, if you are going to jump with vSphere 6.5, you'll be likely the one finding and reporting them. So it's just something to consider every time you decide to jump the new release, right? You're the one who's reporting bugs. One major change that's kind of outside of VDDK, but rather in vSphere API, so we can no longer enable changelog tracking on new VMs, on newly added VMs, if the VM has a existing snapshot. So that was the case originally. If you remember ESXi 4, ESXi 5, it was also impossible to enable CBT if VMware had snapshots. At some point, VMware removed that limitation. We didn't really announce that, but we just started working. We could just enable CBT regardless of snapshot presence. In 6.5, it's disabled again because VMware found some bugs in certain circumstances when you create reverse snapshots and CBT gets corrupted. So it's no longer possible to enable snapshot if CBT FVM has a snapshot, and if you try that, you'll see a warning in the job that we were unable to enable CBT because of existing snapshot. As I like to say, unable to can enable CBT. All right. Next, most important, probably the biggest impact from in VDDK 6.5 comes around NBD. And why is it important is actually NBD is quite popular processing mode, and it's also in the UI it's referred to as network processing mode. It's roughly 50% of all proxies using this NBD mode, and it's popular. It was always popular, but for different reasons. So originally it was popular because that mode is kind of default mode that always works, and people who didn't really dive deep into VMware backup and how it works and best practices, they would deploy the backup, our Vim backup on a physical server, and it really is the only default mode that is available when you have all-in-one installation on a physical server, right? If you didn't worry about deploying hot hat proxies, direct SAN, and so on. So it always was extremely popular, and now it's even on the rise because as 10 gigabit Ethernet becomes more and more popular and more people deploy it, NBD actually works reasonably well on 10 gigabit Ethernet, and we had I know of a few big customers who specifically designed their backup infrastructure around backup over the network via NBD. So that's why it's important, because we basically are talking about impacting 50% of deployments immediately. So the big change there is while enabling support for encrypted VMs in VDDK 6.5, VMware decided to make a change to enforce NBDSSL always. That means that today in VM backup application UI, it is actually controllable, right? We always had that checkbox where you could say, okay, use network processing mode, and if you wanted, you could also check the checkbox that says also encrypt that traffic. Now basically it doesn't matter if backup replication asks for NBD or NBDSSL, VDDK will always force NBDSSL. From one perspective it's not bad because it's security, but from another perspective it really drops the performance up to 30-50%. We have done multiple tests. It seems to depend on CPU primarily. In some of our labs the backup window increased as much as twice, but those are pretty weak old hosts, and probably the best labs we have it's 20-30% decrease in backup performance, but that's something that you have to keep in mind, right? So if your backup window today is 8 hours and your backup takes 7 hours, then you shouldn't really upgrade right now, because your backup window will go through the roof, right? You will spill into the production hours. So again, if you're using NBD, any other processing mode, you're fine. If you're using NBD, before you upgrade, you can actually test it. So if you want to see how it works for you on an NBDSL, go ahead right now, edit your proxy settings and check that checkbox and see how much longer backup will take with NBDSL enabled today, because obviously it will not change. This slower performance will be as slow when you upgrade to 6.5. So if you check it today and you still are able to fit your backup window, go ahead and upgrade to 6.5. If you cannot fit your backup window, then better stay on 6.0 for now. I did notify VMware. They explained basically that in their test they didn't see initially a big impact, so they didn't basically think it through. They are going to address it in future updates. I don't know when. Hopefully sooner or later. I assume that will probably be addressed in VDDK, so that means after they release a new VDDK we need to test it, and probably need to put it in the next Vim update and so on, so it will not be instant unless they somehow manage to fix it in a update to ESXi host in a patch or so on. But my impression is that they realize the issue that backup window going through the roof is not a good way to promote upgrading to 6.5. So, but for now the issue is there. It would affect anything, yeah. It would affect replication or any NBD reads, NBD writes. Everything is slowed down, presumably because this additional encryption overhead or something. But it's really significant. The overhead is really significant. Second change around NBD is kind of the change we've done, and it's around maximum NBD connection, and it's also reduced for 6.5. just to step back a little bit, Vim has this hidden limit of maximum NBD connections per host. It was significantly increased in 9.5, and now it's gonna be reduced again because of VDK 6.5 showing some instability with increased amount. So again, to give you some history, up until 9.5, no matter of ESXi host version, we had a maximum connection number being 7. It wasn't really scientific at the point, that selection. We just didn't want to overload the host a lot. But larger customers started to complain that, you know, that's really too little for them. And after that, around 9.5, we did actually scientifically research what would be real maximum connection limit that we should use. During our research, it appeared that this thing actually changed a lot in between 4.1 and 5.0. Now there is a different way how connections share resources. Right now there is a shared buffer, and so 28 was basically a scientifically calculated connection limit. In fact, it's around 32, but we wanted to keep some of them still available for potentially for other applications like maybe VMware converter running and so on. Now with 28 and ESXi 6.5, VDDK 6.5 doesn't behave reliably. So again, this is not scientifically but empirically. After stress testing, we reduced it from 28 to 20. So if you're already on 9.5 and NBD, you will see some maybe changes in NBD jobs. Okay. Last thing is actually a kind of a positive feature. It would appear as a positive at least for some scenarios, and that's optional NBD traffic compression. If you already saw the update 1 release notes, that actually talks about it. There is a registry key. Originally we planned to put it in UI, but after our tests we decided to keep it in registry key because it's not really so useful, and you will see the test results. It's also useful because it uses a lot of host CPU resources, and it basically not only can slow down in VMs potentially, but also it impacts the transfer rates as well. Which is why, as you can see from this table, that's our test, it does make sense to enable only when you're baking up over WAN. So that would be the scenario when your ESXi host is, for example, in a remote office, and your proxy is in HQ, and that proxy basically pulls the data over WAN from that remote host into the HQ repository, something like that. And this is basically how it compares. I was actually hoping that we would probably enable skip Z compression by default, but we in our test it appeared that it was pretty useless, right? That traffic didn't change much. Probably because we already skip zeros, right? We have first we use CBT to skip zeros during full backup. That's little unknown fact, but CBT is also used during full backup. On top of that, we even do the advanced processing like BitLooker, where we skip the deleted blocks on a file system level. So it doesn't really add much help to us, even that skips that compression, except it increases processing time a little bit. And as you can see, as you switch to high compression levels, it does reduce the traffic, but processing time really dramatically improves. We actually didn't, as you can see, didn't even finish the last test because it was 20% only 15 minutes. But again, if for some scenarios, perhaps if you're backing up remotely, I don't know many customers doing that. Everybody usually tries to put proxy next to the host. But if you're doing that, just something to keep in mind that there is this possibility to limit the WAN traffic, even though it may impact the processing performance on fast links. Yeah, in short, NBD is even worse than before that. Good comment. Yeah, but again, VMware realizes that, and my understanding is that they're working on solving the primary issue at least. Okay, so that's it for NBD changes. Now let's talk about networkless processing. So things like application aware processing for guests, guest file system indexing. As you probably know, we will always attempt to do that processing without the network connection to the guest, assuming it's not always available, especially in like secure private clouds or service providers infrastructures. We used to use VIX API, so-called VIX API, to do that. Now it's discontinued in vSphere 6.5, and it's not like just completely discontinued. It was replaced with a new API. It's called just vSphere Management API, and that's basically what we're using today. Again, using the same approach, we're only using the new API for ES6 6.5. We don't try to use it for previous hosts, previous host versions, even though technically it says it's compatible. There are no known limitation, in fact, today. It's just something to keep in mind when you upgrade, right? If you start seeing some issues with guest processing or indexing, you'll know what to blame. People usually like us to say, what issues to expect, and that's kind of one of those things where we don't know, there's no known issues so far, but just something to potentially expect, because that's a pretty major change. It's completely new API and completely new code instead of the one that we had for 5 years. But again, only 6.5, no going back with this new API to previous versions. Let me drink some water. Okay. Next big change is VMFS version 6. Again, something that's coming with vSphere 6.5. New, really major release. Lots of new features there. To me, most important unmap related. So you can do both arrays can do unmap and direct, and unmap can also be performed from the guest. If you follow VMware closely, you know that they had this feature technically in version 5, but it never worked well. I was always excited about it and always promoting it, but it would never work well, and eventually I think VMware disabled it in some update. So what it took is rewriting VMFS to the new major release, but now it works presumably stable, and yeah, that's really good stuff, right? Other changes include using SE sparse type of snapshots for all VDDKs. So if you're using vSphere 6.0 today, you will have classic snapshots that's called VMFS sparse for disks of less than 2 terabyte. And for virtual disk more than 2 terabyte, you're already using these SE sparse snapshots. Now with VMFS 6, SE sparse are default snapshots regardless of disk type. And that does cause some issues, but we'll talk about them a little bit later. And finally, the new version is support for 512E drives for the local storage devices. So even in 6.0, VMware already supported 512 for remote storage. Now you basically can use such hard drives for local storage within your hosts. For example, if it's maybe a branch deployment, you only have a single host and you don't want to bother with SAN, then you can use now those big drives in a host directly. So that's new major version of VMFS, what it brings. It is in fact a significant change from previous VMFS. It's not just a major update. The internal structures look to be pretty significantly modified, and yeah, we need to have to work on researching it carefully to restore some of the functionality, some of the advanced functionality we had. So potential areas of impact is any backup mode that reads the data directly from SAN. So in case of Vim, specifically, it's backup from storage snapshots for block storage only, obviously. In case of any vendor, that's a direct SAN transport mode. So because every other vendor normally just uses VDDK and direct SAN transport mode, that mode reads the data directly from SAN. Again, could be potentially bugs. We don't know. Just something to watch for. And a replication job. As you know, our replication jobs store replica restore points as snapshots, and now snapshots of a different type. And so this change will impact, it has some impact that we're researching right now. Specifically, it appears that HOTAD requires much more IOPS when dealing with snapshots that use SE sparse format, which is now the default, right? That's basically the graph of recent testing. As you can see, HOTAD had a few times larger IOPS load on the storage. As a result, yeah, more IOPS is obviously not good because it directly translates in worse performance. So in this test, actually, NVDSSL was performing 10 times faster. So hot add was like 13 megabyte per second, and NVDSSL was 130 megabytes per second, and that's 10 gigabit network. NFS, no, good question. We didn't test yet, but it would be good to test. Now, again, quickly, vSphere attacks. Not much to worry about here, except again the new API. That's actually a third change for Vim as far as the vSphere attacks API. So previously, first version of our vSphere attacks support was at the time when API wasn't even available. Then we used some other API. Now that's a kind of third incarnation. Now it's like really official API. It's called vSphere Automation SDK. So we changed our support to this official API. Again, this API is used only for vSphere 6.5. It's claimed that it supports 6.0, but we did see some issues, like some tags. We would query VMs for some tags, and VMs wouldn't be returned on 6.0, but on 6.5 it works fine. So again, we decided only use it for vSphere 6.5. Again, potential impact only the jobs that are using vSphere tags. So if you heavily using vSphere tags, after you upgrade to vSphere 6.5, just keep an eye on those jobs, make sure everything's right, make sure they're not missing any VMs, like we saw it in vSphere 6.0, this API potentially missing some VMs. Actually, it wasn't VMs, I think, it was missing some tags. So we would search for a tag and it wouldn't find a tag that existed, something like that. Okay. So finally, last topic, encrypted VMs. So again, if you're not interested in using this, that's the last topic. Encrypted VMs, first encrypted VMs 101. That's actually the thing. If you wanna kind of test it, play with it, that's one thing that will not just work immediately. Unlike every other vSphere feature, pretty much. That's because this functionality does require a key management server. So before you have that deployed, you simply cannot create encrypted VMs. Essentially, key management server is what keeps all the encryption keys, those VMs, the virtual disks are encrypted with. So when hypervisor needs to read the data from disk, it actually queries KMS for the decryption key, and then it's able to actually decrypt it. You may have the question, right? Doesn't KMS finally add that single point of failure to your vSphere? And previously, you only had to worry about vCenter, right? But more or less, some things could still work when vCenter is down on individual hosts. KMS is that real SPOF, and we did actually had twice the situation already when our QC labs, entire labs, turned into pumpkins because the KMS server was screwed up. Once it was pretty classic. Somebody just pulled a plug from the host, a network cable from the host, and something happened with the VM, and all the keys were lost, and the entire lab wasn't accessible anymore because all the keys were lost. So yeah, watch out and back up that KMS, and I don't know, keep it highly available somehow, because that's right now is a huge issue in the vSphere design if you lose it. What are the options for KMS? So if you want to play with it, what are the best way to get that KMS? So we ourselves used the one that was available with vSphere 6.5 beta. It was pretty flaky, but it worked. It was based on, I think it was based on that open source OpenKME IP project. We did try to use this one, the later, and it was so extremely unreliable that we came back to using that the option that VMware provided with the beta. I don't know, actually, right now it's not available for public download, that the version that VMware provided, and there is somebody told me that they are going to release it. Other people said that it was just temporary, it's never going to be released, and so on. So I don't know what's the future for that. There are a number of third-party options. We actually investigated them, and it was pretty interesting experience. So there are apparently a number of vendors that produce these key management servers, and when we first contacted them, they were completely unaware that something like that is coming. and they had their own customer base. Now suddenly, right, the day vSphere 6.5 releases, probably they'll have thousands of customers calling them, because there's not too many options for KMS on the market available today. But I can't recommend a single one. Again, we tried to get a trial from one vendor. It was really hard. They wanted to do a sales demo. Another vendor didn't want to give us a trial because they want like minimum 10K purchase. So, and again, at this time for us, that the one that VMware provided, that KMS worked well, so we didn't bother. There is also unconfirmed rumor from someone that I heard last week, that some of those vendors is planning to announce a free offering for KMS, but you will only have to pay for support. Again, probably that's the reaction to the huge demand and really no good solution that's available. But that's a rumor. I don't know if it's true or false. Yeah, I guess bottom line right now, if you want to play with it, is it's probably the only option is to try to get some trial from the third-party vendor, because OpenKMI IP, whatever, doesn't work well at all. We couldn't really make it work, and that the one that was available with vSphere beta is not public available right now. Okay, so that's basically 101. What are the peculiarities, let's say, of encrypted VMs, how you back them up and how you restore them? So for backup, as soon as you want to use encrypted VMs, you're losing a whole bunch of processing modes, obviously, because right now anything that's stored on a SAN or local storage or whatever, basically you cannot make sense of it without going through the host. Only host can decipher the data by, again, obtaining the key from the KMS and then decrypting the data on the fly. Whatever is lying on the storage in files is unreadable. Because of that, obviously, what are you losing? You're losing every single direct storage access mode. Simply that the architecture makes them impossible. So that includes VDDK, direct SAN mode, Vim's proprietary direct NFS, and backup from storage snapshots. Everything becomes unavailable with encrypted VMs, and that can be changed, right? Actually, that makes me thinking maybe we can somehow grab the keys from KMS. I wonder. Okay, need to research. So what are supported processing modes? Officially supported are virtual appliance or hot hat processing mode, but the backup proxy itself must be an encrypted VM. So that's because you cannot attach encrypted disks to a VM that's not an encrypted VM. Right? It's again, it's security. It's the architecture of encrypted VMs. That would be a hole. If you don't have a single proxy, that is a single hot hat proxy that is encrypted, that is itself an encrypted VM, the processing will fail over to NBD. And as of Vim 9.5 update 1, we actually enlightened our load balancer to understand this requirement. So if the load balancer has encrypted VMs to process, it will only look for proxies that are encrypted VMs itself. So it's fully automated, and load balancer is fully aware about encrypted VMs and their specific requirements with hot hat processing. Yeah, NBD mode has no special requirements. It forces NBD SSL, and I'm pretty sure even if VMware fixes the original issue we talked about, NBD SSL will remain mandatory for encrypted VMs. I just don't really see any reason why would you want to have encrypted VMs on storage but then transfer them unencrypted over the network, right? Makes no sense. So probably that will always be NBD SSL for encrypted VMs. One security aspect there is that VDDK actually fetches unencrypted content of encrypted VMDKs. So by default, if you just create a job, will process encrypted VMs normally, but the backups will contain unencrypted data. That kind of makes sense if you think, right? Because if you lose the entire environment, including KMS, you still want to restore the backups without requiring to actually have that KMS available. Otherwise, it will be completely trapped. So that kind of design makes sense, but do make sure that you enable actual backup file encryption in Vim. Otherwise, it's gonna be kind of makes no sense that production storage has encrypted VMs data and your backups are unencrypted. So just something to keep in mind. Again, backup pulls the unencrypted VM data from encrypted VMs, and it's your responsibility to enable encryption in the job, and you would want to do it almost every time. For the restore, common question is basically how do I restore? How does Vim encrypt that VM? The simple answer is Vim doesn't actually encrypt VM. It's vSphere that will encrypt the VM as we send the data on vPowerNFS server. When you finalize the recovery, again, you go through this quick migration wizard, and again, you have to specify, or you maybe use storage emotion, and if you specify the target data store that has a encryption policy attached to it, then the VM will be encrypted as the virtual disks are moved there. So it's pretty simple concept. That's what I had. I think 35 minutes, great result. So if you have any other questions about vSphere 6.5, I've tried to remember everything that we faced so far in our testing. Will quick rollback work for encrypted VMs? Great question. Let me think for a moment. Yes, 99% probability that will work. I didn't specifically ask our QC. They would probably bring it up if it didn't work. But yeah, I don't see how it would how encryption would prevent quick rollback, because again, we are really abstracted from dealing with encryption complexities by VDDK and by the host itself. Encrypted snapshots, great question. I assume that you're talking about like storage snapshots and also maybe replicas. Yeah, there are definitely some limitations that you'll face with. For example, if you're talking about Vim Explorer for storage snapshots, then again, anything that needs to access storage directly, it will not work. But for example, when you do the restore from storage snapshots specifically, so not backup but restore from storage snapshots, we work slightly differently there. We actually do access the VMDKs through VDDK, so in that case it actually might work. Can VMs on VMware6 be migrated? I'm not sure if VMware6 I think quick migration will support that. I mean, Vim quick migration supports that for sure. If you're talking about storage migration by VMware, then I'm not quite sure if that's supported. Previously, I think VMware always supported migrations between the different VMFS versions, but I'm not sure it's that case. I will not claim it. Direct NFS, yeah, absolute direct NFS is not impacted. We're talking only about VMFS 6. VMFS is generally a file system that's only used for local storage as well as block storage, so SAN, fiber channel or iSCSI SAN. NFS is a kind of totally different world, right? So when you're talking about NFS, you're hosting VMs on an NFS share that can be backed up by whatever file system. It doesn't matter. NetApp, they have their own file system. Other vendors have their own, and direct NFS is not impacted. Have we done performance tests for VIX against the API? Yeah, I didn't think that there was any changes in the performance. The API still uses the same internal APIs. I think what was changed is just external kind of representation of the internal APIs. Vim replication from VMFS 6 to VMFS 5 will definitely work, just like quick migration. This is because when we do replication or quick migration, we basically recreate the VM and we stuff its disks with the data. So it really doesn't matter for us. We can do any file system to any file system, meaning VMFS to NFS, NFS to VMFS, between VMFS versions, and so on. The question about free parv vols. it's not really related to this topic, but no, we don't do anything special. I mean, we support FreePAR. If you use FreePAR with vVols, we will back it up and restore VMs. But our special integrations that we have for FreePAR that uses VMFS will not work. 9.5 update 2 will be released regardless, because we do release updates, try to release updates every 3 months to basically address the common support cases. If there will be a new VDDK version that, for example, addresses NBD restriction, NBD SSL, or maybe lifts the amount of maximum connections, then we'll definitely consider it for inclusion. It just makes sense, right, to also update it. But I guess what I'm saying is update 2 will be released regardless if VMware has some new updates or not, just because we want to free our support from common issues. Any chance perhaps that might allow replication from storage snapshots? No, it's really unrelated. Lack of replication from storage snapshots is basically the feature that we're lacking. It's not that VDDK can help it. We just need to build it. For Acropolis, there is a long discussion, like 6 pages on the forum. If you, Seth, if you want to read kind of my perspective, it's a long reading. Look for AHV in a forum search, and you'll find it. IPv6 roadmap also, there is a topic currently. There is a big discussion, right? How it's really important. I mean, eventually we'll have all the features, right? We'll have HV, we'll have IPv6. The only problem is how we prioritize them against other pending features. It's not a problem, I guess. That's actually my only job, right? To prioritize them correctly, make sure that we address whatever feature brings us more value to the product first before we implement features that have less value. I can say that, for example, IPv6 support has not been a roadblock for us. Even with telcos, we just closed a huge deal with the one telco. IPv6, no support, no problem. But as soon as it starts to impact our deals, of course, the priority will rise. What effect will encrypted VMs have on deduplication compression in Vim jobs? Again, excellent question. Just keep in mind that encrypted VMs have their disks stored as encrypted on the primary storage, but when we perform backup, VDDK actually unencrypts and sends to Vim the raw data. From this perspective, from this point on, it really doesn't matter for us if VM is encrypted or not. We can do whatever we do with it. All the encryption, compression, all the fancy magic like BitLooker, like excluding some files, all of that we can do that because for us, it doesn't matter if VM is encrypted. VDK already took care of providing us the raw data unencrypted. So zero impact there on this advanced processing stuff. Replication to vVols right now, it's a limitation. My understanding is the limitation is on VMware side, that they don't support basically writing into snapshots, and we restore points as snapshots. So I guess if that is to stay, that would mean we'll probably need to re-architect the architecture and go back to something that to the way we had the replication, like in actually earlier days in version 1, version 2, when the restore points were stored as normal files, just like almost like backup files. And there are definitely drawbacks to that, because then the failover to a specific restore point would take a long time. Today you can just power them up from the snapshot, from any restore point. You just go and power up, even if Vim server is down. Tomorrow you won't be able to do that, because you'll need to have a lot of logic to actually unpack those restore points and put them inside of a VMDK to make it whatever current to the restore point, and then power on a VM. So not only it will take a long time to perform such failover, but also not something you can do without Vim. So it would be ideal if we can avoid that, but what I'm saying is that that's how Vim worked originally, but it didn't work for customers. That's why we're now using snapshots. Yeah, I mean, vVols is pretty new technology. Maybe they'll remove that limitation later. John, there is a big discussion on the forum. The preferred method is not to back it up at all. Uh, I mean, just put the database, a Vim configuration database on the remote SQL. That's usually they're very well protected. There's like always on, like SQL clusters and so on, and then you don't have to worry about that. If your Vim server dies, you just redeploy it in 5 minutes and point it to existing database. It literally will take less than 5 minutes. It's very, very fast. The other question is that configuration itself, of course, needs to be backed up, right? So there is a configuration backup that you also can perform in case your SQL dies, your remote SQL dies, then you'll have a configuration backup to restore. So it doesn't exclude the need to back up actual data in a database somehow. If the backup VM goes unencrypted, uh, it's not a big loophole if you're doing it only makes sense because if you're not storing the VM unencrypted, then you'll most likely not be able to restore it if you have a catastrophic issue in your environment and all your infrastructure is dead, and including the KMS server and so on. However, it's not a loophole also because you can just simply enable encryption of Vim backups, and now post production data will be encrypted by VMware encryption, and your backups will be encrypted by Vim encryption, and only you know the password. Okay, since there are no other questions on vSphere, I'll answer some unrelated questions as well. So Thomas is asking about Vim endpoint and backing up servers. Thomas, yes, that's many of our customers are doing it today, actually, with a free endpoint backup. It works. It will not have any advanced like application web processing like we have in backup and replication. It will only do like basic VSS, and it will not do any special steps that Microsoft requires from some enterprise applications. But as basic backup, it will work. I would definitely recommend taking a look at the beta of the next version of Vim Endpoint Backup, which is called Vim Agent for Windows. Right now it's public beta you can download, and it's going to be released within the next 2 months. And it has that edition, server edition, and in that server edition we basically migrated all the application web processing engine from Vim Backup application into the agent. So now that's basically full server support. I will not be at in UK, but I will be in the main Vimon event in New Orleans in 3 months. So yeah, you should come there. It's gonna be big. We're gonna first we're gonna basically just to give you some spoilers, we're gonna announce for the first time we're gonna talk about Vim Backup and Replication version 10 and a couple of other new products, and it's gonna happen at Vimon in New Orleans. So there's definitely a lot to learn there if you can come. Yes, Vim configuration backup is all that's needed to restore. Basically the way Vim configuration backup works is we go and pull the data from the SQL and store it in a proprietary format. So in a simple example, your backup server dies. If you have remote SQL, it's still normal. You reinstall the backup server, and in the setup you point it to the existing database, and everything continues to work normally. Worst case scenario, everything is lost, both the backup server and remote SQL is lost. Then you set up the new installation of Vim Backup and Replication server. Probably you'll do a local database in this case because your remote is dead. So you do like a most default installation of Vim, Then you go to the settings, initiate the restore of the configuration from your configuration backup file, and from there you just go ahead and it will restore all the state, all the information, configuration information back to the local database. In fact, it's even supported between versions, so you can technically take a backup that's done on Vim backup replication 9.0 and then deploy 9.5, the new installation on 9.5, and import backup from 9.0 into 9.5. That's the way some of the customers choose to do upgrades, right? For whatever reason, I don't know, but it works. Just saw the confirmation last week on the forums that somebody did that. Everything worked flawlessly. Yeah, that it will actually appear, or John, the session will appear automatically on my channel. After I finish it, it probably will take about 30 minutes to process, and it will just be published. Maybe it will not be shown automatically. I don't remember what is the setting. Maybe I have to make that switch, but I'll make sure to do it. So within the next 24 hours, for sure, you'll see it in my channel. Hey, Columbus! I love Columbus. You have some good pubs, guys. next to our office. One of my most favorite beer is actually only available in Columbus, Ohio. So it's always worth the trip, even though it's 3 legs for me and almost 20 hours. Yeah, I don't like sweet. Okay, thanks everybody. Almost at the top of the hour, so thanks for coming. Until next times.